Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, wherever you are. Thank you for joining me. So let's just begin this workshop about storytelling. It's named What a Shame, and I will explain to you later what that name means and why that funny name was chosen. So now I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully you can see it now. Do you see the slide, Marie?
Yes, looks great. And also, please introduce yourself. Don't be too
Yeah,
modest.
that's part of the presentation. I will introduce. Yeah, I'm keeping you in suspense for a little bit.
Great.
So the at the beginning, the idea was that I was going to start this presentation by announcing the winner of the Best International Short Film. But my understanding is that right now the cat is out of the bag, and most of you already know that the wonderful film, The Love Box, won as our Best International Short Film. It is wonderful. I invite you to watch all of the wonderful pieces that make up this film festival. But I have to confess that certainly The Love Box was one of my favorite pieces. It's just wonderful. I invite you to see it. It's in the words of the directors themselves, this is a film celebrating the love of nature and the nature of love. And it really does that. And for us, let me just give you a little bit of insight. For us, the jury, it wasn't really obvious at the beginning how this film aligned with the festival objectives. So as much as we loved it from the beginning, we were thinking, should this film really be the winner? However, then we really realized that one of the parts of the mission of this festival is to leave you feeling inspired to envision and shape our possible future. And this film really does that in a very compelling, very emotional way, because I especially love how it shows us how painstaking it is to produce scientific knowledge. And I think that is extremely important nowadays when we are, well, not all of us, but many people think that having an opinion is the same as knowing a fact. And opinions are opinions, facts are facts. Creating scientific knowledge is difficult, takes time, and that's something really important that we should all know. And so this film conveys that in such a lovely way. So happy to say it was the winner. And so, here, yeah. So here I would ask, please, Marie, to show you a short extract of an interview she did with the two directors. And I want to show you this because it's precisely what I consider the main strength of this film and the main thing I want us to focus on during this talk today, which is how to turn hard data to how to make it human, how to make it emotional in order to draw your audience in. So Marie, if you could please take it away.
Yes, definitely. I'm going to take over your screen share for that.
One of the things we were thinking about is the balance between both nature and humanity, and finding a way to tell a story about the O'Briens that made them humans. Not that scientists aren't humans, of course they are, but showing the audience that they had a life outside of that also, and giving them a full scope of that life, and also balancing the fact that their collection was a really big deal at the same time. So I think that within the film, you'll see that there's this desire to focus on the fact that their collection has great reach, and a lot is going to happen as a result of it for the field of entomology. Or actually, it's going to affect the field of entomology greatly. But also the fact that Charlie and Lois are relatable, they're humorous, and they're great people to be around.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, again.
So I'll continue. So yeah, the main takeaway for me from that part of the interview is what she says, that yes, this collection that these two scientists, this collection of insects that these two scientists have gathered through their lives is super valuable, is super important for science, is going to change the field of entomology. But all of that is hard data. All of that could make us disinterested. It feels cold. It doesn't feel approachable. But by telling that story and conveying that data through the wonderful characters that Charlie and Luis are, then it becomes human and it becomes emotional. And that is the main strength of this film and the main thing that all of us as storytellers should be aiming to do. So let's continue. And now we arrive to the part where I introduce myself finally. So who am I and why am I here talking to you about storytelling? Well, my name is Monika Naranjo Gonzalez, or Monika Naranjo Shepherd now that I live here in the UK, but I'm originally from Costa Rica and Mexico. And what these two countries have in common is that both of them have two coasts. So my childhood was very, very intertwined with the ocean always. I mainly grew up in Costa Rica, so you can go to the beach very, very easily. And then since I was a kid also, I always loved writing stories and telling them to my classmates or drawings. And I was always living like in a kind of fantasy world. And I think it was just a matter of time before those two passions merged and my love for storytelling and my love for the ocean came together. And that's how 13 years ago I founded LUMA, which is that little logo that you see in the upper right corner. And that's my company. And for 13 years, this small boutique studio designs stories for many types of clients, but I mostly enjoy working with scientists translating complex content into easy to understand and memorable stories. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, on the description of this talk, it was said that it was going to be a workshop where I would be sharing stories about storytelling adventures. And let's just set the expectations from the beginning. I don't think we have enough time for a workshop right now, so I'm not going to be giving you exercises and anything. And I'm not sure I'm going to be sharing that many tales about my work. But I will be sharing some aspects of my day-to-day work and how that they affect the way I create stories, starting with how my professional life normally develops. I normally am dropped in the middle of an already developing situation, and I need to start detecting the story on the spot. So I have to find the parts that should be shared, translating content and creating messages on the go. It's not very easy, and I don't have the luxury of big budgets or having a team. It's only me. So today I will share with you what are some of the elements that I'm constantly looking for while I'm doing my work, trying to ensure that the stories I am creating are entertaining as well as informative. So what are we going to do today then, if this is not a workshop and I am not telling you lots of stories about my work? So we're just going to be talking about story and storytelling. And so normally it's important to have some information about your audience, but I have no idea how many people are watching this, what you do for a living, where you are. So I'm going to assume that because you're watching this because of a film festival, perhaps you are filmmakers yourselves or you're storytellers. And I'm going to give it a little twist of stories for documentary. I am not going to give you a recipe. This is not a workshop. I'm just going to give you a few pointers that I picked up during my time. And I think some of the films that I watched for this festival would have benefited perhaps from some of those pointers. Hence the name of the workshop, or not workshop, of the talk. What a shame, because I'm informed that that was my go-to phrase during the deliberations of the jury.
I'll just come as the awkward voice from Without a Face. But yes, that was actually, I can just vouch for that. Monika, as one of the jury members, did mention that not all the time, just maybe twice or three times. And it was a compliment to the film that was actually discussed at the time. And there was just that tiny little bit. And it's like, they could have just twisted that a bit. What a shame. And
Yeah.
that how this came about, to add my 2 cents. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, of course, of course. So yeah, that was the case. Many times I would say, oh, what a shame, if only they had, explored this a little bit more, or had not lost this from sight. What a shame, it would have had so much potential. I mean, the films were wonderful anyways, but yeah, apparently that is one of the phrases that I used to use. So before we dive in, let's just also bear in mind that this is not an exact science. So we are all here just trying to craft a story the best way we can, but it's not an exact science. Sometimes a story works, and sometimes the audience just doesn't connect with it, right? So really the craft of story making is writing and rewriting and rewriting and polishing and practicing in order to develop that sort of sixth sense that whispers in our ear that you have a story here. And yeah, it's just a matter of practice. So what is storytelling? Let's talk about what we mean when we say story and what we mean when we say storytelling. So stories have been absolutely fundamental for the development of society and of culture, for the development of us as humans, as a human race. Think about it, for many, many years, centuries, our human ancestors, they didn't read, they didn't write. The only way they had to convey knowledge, to convey culture through generations was through oral tradition. And that's where story comes in. There's something truly magical about the way we can construct a story and encapsulate information in the form of a story. So we make it possible for me to come and tell somebody something, and that person will be able to not only understand it, but memorize it and then pass it along. That's only possible because that information is presented through the shape of a story that we can connect with, we can memorize, we can replicate. It's really, really wonderful. And that is a key difference between story and telling, right? It's not just the information, the story is how we tell it. And today we're going to focus more on how we tell that information. We do it all the time, because that's what makes us human. I didn't study an obscure career that only I know about. If you're human, you're telling stories all the time. The only thing is that because we do it all the time, nonstop, it's so natural to us that perhaps we kind of forget how it's, not forget, kind of lose track of the elements that are involved in a good story. So that's my job. I try to take a step back and ask, what are the building blocks and how should we assemble them in order to create the most compelling, the most effective story? The pleasure that we as human beings derive from a tale that is well told is nature's way of seducing us into paying attention. That is to say, that if we think what we're going to say is truly important, we owe it to our human nature to tell that tale in a good way, because that's how we as humans know, oh, I should be paying attention to this. This seems to be important. And neuroscientists know this, right? We human beings are visual animals. We excel at visual imagery, and our brains have evolved this ability because we as humans, to survive, need to be able to create an internal mental picture or a model of the world in which we can rehearse forthcoming events, forthcoming actions, without the risks of actually being in that action, in that event. So that is what is truly important about storytelling in the context of documentary. We are enabling our audience to experience something that would otherwise be too difficult, too dangerous, too complicated for them to learn and experience. In the case of Lockbox, the short film that won in the film festival, I think one of the wonderful things that they show us is that they show us what could happen if we had the luck of knowing exactly what we loved at a very young age, and then we had devoted our entire life to that love. It's wonderful. They enable us to experience that. Coming back to film and documentary, I really like this quote by Michelangelo Antonioni, film director from Italy. And he says that film is a language that bypasses the mind and speaks directly to the heart. And that is, if you think about it, every time you watch a movie, that's what you're expecting that the movie will do for you, that you will be completely immersed in the story. And really then you're bypassing your brain. You're just living the emotion. So if we want to start creating a story and you think you have something important that you want to share and that you want to create a film about, where do you begin finding that story? Where do you begin thinking, this is how I should shape it? Well, this is a good place to begin looking for that. So we as filmmakers want to get something from our audience, and they as an audience have certain needs and they have certain wants, and where our wants and their needs overlap, that's where our conversation is, that's where our story lies. So we always, as I said before, should have some information of our audience. And I know we love to say it's for the general public. So everybody from a 6-month-old baby to a 90-year-old person. But that's just not the case. The same story and the same content is not going to appeal to the wider audience. Film industries have a specific audience in mind, and they craft their stories to cater to those audiences. So it'd be great if we could have as much information of our target audience as possible. But at the very least, we know that as filmmakers or storytellers, we want people to be interested in our subject. And we know that at the very minimum, they want to be touched and they want to be entertained. So that's where the overlap is. We want to tell them something about something, and they are willing to give us that time if only we are entertaining and we are compelling. So how can we make a story more entertaining? How can we make it more emotional? Let's answer that. First, we have to be very aware that story is in the specifics. So we human beings don't think in abstract. We don't like it. We think in specific images. Anything that is too conceptual, too abstract, too general, it's our responsibility as storytellers to make it more tangible. And we only make it more tangible through the protagonists that we choose or through the specific struggles or actions that we are presenting in our story. So for instance, for me, when I go on expeditions, I always obviously talk to the scientists about their science, but I also make a point about talking to them or about why they care about that science. And for instance, what have been some aspects of their particular research that have really, really surprised them. And through that, I'm trying to find specific aspects of the science that could connect with my audience. So remember, specific, specific, specific. Abstract doesn't speak to people. Specific speaks to people. Because from birth, our primary goal is to make causal connections. So since we're little, we begin thinking in these terms. If this, then this. We always follow a cause and effect trajectory from start to finish. And because the brain analyzes everything in terms of cause and effect, when a story doesn't follow a clear cause and effect trajectory, the brain doesn't know what to make of it. We cannot make sense of it. So this is the first step. You have to find ways to present the general information of your subject through specific actions and character experiences. And you have to introduce them in a cause and effect manner. Some building blocks to create our story. First of all, we have to be very aware that our audience is always in the hunt for 3 basic answers. They are always scanning our story, trying to find the answer to these 3 questions. First, whose story is, what is happening here, and what's at stake? Fail to give our audience to those 3 questions, we will lose their attention, or we will leave them very frustrated. So for instance, let's answer those 3 questions for Love Dogs, the short film. This story is about Charlie and Lois O'Brien. what's happening here is that after 60 years of collecting more than 1 million insects from nearly 70 countries, they must decide what to do with their legacy now that they are coming to the end of their own lives. What's at stake is the incredible amount of knowledge that they've produced in the form of the largest private collection in the world with a value of $10 million. So what are some ingredients that we need in order to present the audience with the answers to these questions? First of all, we need a character. Seems obvious, but it must be said. A story needs a character. Something must be happening to someone in our story. And a story is how what happens affects someone who is trying to achieve something. How he or she changes is what the story is about. At the end of the day, what the protagonist is forced to learn as they navigate the plot is what the story is about. Charlie and Lois, who we see here in this photo, learn that they must let go of the product of their love, their wonderful collection, in order to allow that love to live on. So story is always an internal journey. It's not an external one. It's what's happening to our character. And our audience is always craving the notion that they've come at a crucial juncture in someone's life. So in the case of the love box, and here I'm going to ask Marie to present just a short extract from the film. And I just want to show you in just 1 minute how these characters create so much empathy from the first moment you see them. My husband Paul and he watched all of the films for the festival with me, and we were watching this one. And when we watched this scene, we both looked at each other and we went like, that was awesome. We just fell in love with them immediately after this little clip. So Marie, please take it away.
Sounds good. Warning that I'm sharing it from the browser this time. So yeah, let's see how that goes. Okay. Oh, hopefully that's working. Not quite yet. All right. Well, that means we might need to reload. For a second. Sorry about that. There you go. The one time I tried to play it from the browser, it doesn't work. But just let me find the spot and I'll get back to you. Hopefully I'll be there in a few seconds. Tell us a story.
A story.
Okay, I think I've got it. Let's see if that happens.
Good, because as a storyteller, I'm out of stories.
On the spot, eh? Okay, let's see if we can manage. There's no audio.
That's dangerous as hell. God.
Well, this is the heavy one.
Well, yeah, but this one,
Can you see?
keep it away from the edge here.
When they fight, they use these horns to fight each other.
Yeah, and I'm going to go sit down because my back.
And I'm going to take this out of here so it won't break anything. You could have them again if you want them, but not now.
That's it.
Sorry.
Okay, so I have it again. So that's it. That they are interviewing them, but it's just so lovely, and I'm just so happy that they chose to use this little piece of the interview. And actually, in the emails with the directors, they said that this was actually even filming one of their favorite moments, because it's just they allow the action to develop, and it just shows this. They are so natural on the camera. He is freaking out because he thinks that the way she's showing the insects is too dangerous, but they are so adorable and so old, and so they are tired, and they both walk out of the scene as if they weren't aware that a camera is filming them. They are adorable, and so yeah, the film itself is amazing, but these characters are just exceptional. So another thing that we need to obviously have is a conflict. And conflict doesn't need to be like super dramatic and explosions and all of that, but there has, remember, our audience is trying to feel that they are arriving at a crucial point in somebody else's life, and crucial points obviously engender a bit of drama, a bit of change, a bit of doubt, a bit of something, right? All drama is conflict. Without conflict, there's no action. Without action, there's no character, and without character, there's no story. So if we replay that backwards, a story is driven by the character. The character is defined by its actions, his or her actions. That's how we know the character. And the actions respond to the conflict that we are presenting. So conflict is the story's lifeblood, but the conflict has to be specific to the protagonist's quest. It's not just something that happens to be happening. It's something that is happening and affecting our protagonist. And to create organic, compelling obstacles that work, we have to make sure that everything that our character is facing springs specifically from the problem that they are trying to solve, both internally and externally. And also we have to bear in mind that readers assume, or readers or audiences assume that everything that we're telling them is in a strictly need-to-know basis. So we trust when we're watching a film that every piece of information, each event, each bit of interview matters, and it matters because it has a story consequence, or it gives us an insight that we need to know in order to grasp what's happening. So no one does anything for no reason, whether or not they know it. And we as filmmakers need to be very, very conscious of this and rule out anything that, as much as we like it, is not affecting the character, is not giving special information to our audience to have an insight into our character's psychology, or developing the context in which our character lives. Because the whole point of the story is to explore why this is happening to my character and why the character is reacting the way they do. So coming back to Lovebugs, the goal that our characters have there is to make sure that the fruit of their love is going to live on. And in that, they must face something they have not wanted to deal with their whole lives, which is parting from their precious collection. We know how difficult this is for them because they have shown the true strength of their commitment through dedicating a lifetime to it, through supporting their partners every step of the way, and even through choosing not to have kids. They dedicated their lives to their science. And giving the collection away creates a conflict and creates obstacles for them. So for instance, how to make sure that everything is packed securely, all the information is recorded properly, that all the new people that are going to take over the collection take care of it and know exactly what belongs where, and everybody's on the same page. So Lois and Charlie, they must make sure that they are ready for this big change. So that is conflict. As sweet as and as lovely and poetic as this short film is, it has conflict in it, because conflict is the lifeblood of story. This is a bit of a complex one, but let's dive in. We also need a theme. A theme reveals your take as the storyteller on how an element of human nature defines human behavior. Sounds very complicated. Let's break it down. Theme is a very specific point that you're making about an aspect of human nature. It gives you a metric by which to measure your character's responses to the situations they find themselves in. Theme is the underlying point that the narrative makes about the human experience. So the theme is something universal, a feeling, an emotion, a truth that resonates with most human beings. But they are so vast that they are impossible to wrap your mind around. So it's only when we express them through the flesh and blood of a story that we're able to experience that universal thing and we can experience it and feel it. So what is a universal? What could be a theme? The theme of love, for instance. Love is something that most human beings understand, most human beings can relate to, but it's super big abstract notion. So in order to talk about love and to talk about your take on how love affects the human experience, you need to shape it through a story, through your characters. So it's not just love, it's a particular view of love expressed through your character. Coming back to our short film, Charlie and Lois love each other and they love insects. Their human experience of love, their take on what love is, has to do with discipline and with absolute commitment and selflessness. That is the take on love that they have. And finally, the most important building block of a story, emotions. Without emotion, there's simply no way to retain your audience. A good story really draws its strength from emotion, and it helps us, the audience, to experience our own values in action. It helps us determine what really matters to us instead of telling us what should matter to us. Because when a story helps us to connect with our own values, not as just abstract principles, but as lived experiences, is when they truly have the power to inspire action and inspire people. So all story is emotion based, because if we're not feeling, we're not watching, we're not paying attention. Without emotion, every option, think about it, every option would carry the same weight, right? If we cannot attach a certain degree of emotion to the information that we receive, we will have no way to measure what is important and what is not important, what matters and what doesn't matter. So seeing a story through the eyes of the protagonist's eyes helps convey this emotion. But be very careful that you don't tell your audience what to feel. Because if you tell them you should be feeling this, what they are going to feel is condescended and bullied. To avoid this, you have to just express the emotion through your character and through the actions that you are making the audience witness. And, you know, as counterintuitive as it is, if there's something that is very big, massive, when it's presented in the general, we cannot really create an emotional connection to it. And why is that? Because if you present something that is very general and very big, we as the audience need to stop and think about it in order to manually do what the story should have done for us automatically. So we would need to make sense of this very general thing, as opposed to already have it chopped in little pieces that we can process. And so we can ask our audience to think about something and they can decide not to do it, right? But if we inspire them to feel something, we'll have their attention, because feeling is a reaction. Our feelings let us know what matters to us, and our thoughts will always follow the feelings. So remember that facts that don't affect us don't matter. They just don't matter. This is a little useful list that I always come back to, just so we know that there are certain emotions that actually inhibit action and certain emotions that motivate action. And so the list on the right the list of emotions on the right help us overcome the action inhibiting emotions on the left. So in order to overcome inertia, we need to give a sense of urgency. Apathy, give them a sense of anger. Fear, a sense of hope, which is something that we really need nowadays in face of climate change. Isolation, a sense of solidarity. And self-doubt, a sense that you could make a difference. We are nearing the end of this presentation, and I just wanted to dedicate a few seconds to talk about this, which is, it really seems to be a rule of thumb every time we're talking about storytelling, filmmaking, etc. And we always say, show, don't tell. And of course, don't tell your audience how they should feel. Just help them feel that way. But it seems to me that we tend to take this show, don't tell too literally. So for instance, if the storyteller wants to convey that somebody's sad, then the showing and not telling would be taken to mean that the character should begin crying, right? If the character is sad, show it, cry. But what it really means is to show why the character is sad, We don't just want to see the effect of something being sad. We want to see the cause, what made that character sad. So what show almost always means when we say show, don't tell, is let's see the event unfolding. Don't tell me that this is what happened. If possible, show it to me happening. So in the case of the love box, if we were only told that Charlie and Lois in an interview, that they love each other and they have spent an entire lifetime enjoying their passion for entomology, and now they are getting rid of their collection and that is hard, we would get it. I mean, yeah, of course we can get it, but it wouldn't really touch us. It's only by going through their collection with them and witnessing intimate moments of complicity and of respect between them and of love between the characters that we create a bond with it. And the story helps us bypass thought and we go straight to the heart. Okay, so now we're gonna move into what are some pitfalls that we should avoid when creating our stories. Something that you should try to avoid, or this is a sign that perhaps you need to work on your story a little bit more, is when you're not able to summarize your story in a clearly focused, intriguing sentence or two. So if you cannot do that, you probably need to continue working on your story. Another error is to think that your audience has the same amount of knowledge about the subject than you do. Don't make assumptions for them, just clarify anything that is fundamental for them to understand. On the other hand, don't think that you need to give your audience too much information. They are not idiots. So the audiences nowadays are very sophisticated and they can grasp things very, very quickly. So give them what they need and not any more than that. Only conveying information through words, that is a mistake, as we said. Show, don't tell, right? And then something that I see happening more and more and more, and Hollywood certainly is an example of that, is to rely on cinematographic prowess to sustain a story. Just because the photography is amazing and the music is wonderful and the special effects are out of this world, that's not a story. The story can end up boring people or frustrating them or not being clear. So don't rely on the beauty of the craft to sustain a story, because great stories could be shot with an iPhone. It doesn't make a difference. Another mistake would be to not zero in on a specific human experience and an emotion that can truly make us understand the general through the specific. So I'm just going to quickly, because I said that we should be able to express our story in short sentence. This is how Lovebox is described in short. Over the course of 60 years, entomologists Charlie and Lois O'Brien amassed a collection of more than 1 million insects from nearly 70 countries, the largest private collection in the world with a value of $10 million. But, here's the conflict, as Charlie's battle with Parkinson's becomes increasingly pronounced, he and Lois, 90, make the difficult decision to give away their drawers full of iridescent weevils and plant hoppers. This humorous and poignant film explores the love of nature and the nature of love, and what it means to devote oneself completely to both. Perfect, they know the story they are telling. Some questions that you could ask yourself to help you craft your story. Who is this story about? Are we witnessing a key moment in this character's life? Is there a conflict that I can show and not just tell? Am I making my point specific and visual? Am I expressing a specific point of view about the human experience? Is there a clear emotion that I'm igniting? And that would be me. This is my email, and I am at your service if there's anything I can do for you. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Awesome. Wow. Whew. Thank you. I'm communicating with the team on the other end, and we're all just like, huh. I've really learned something this year.
Oh, I hope that's the case. I hope there's something valuable in there.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Thank you so much. Where to start? Okay, we do have a few questions, so I'll go with that and see how far it takes us. And maybe there's even time for a story from the field. Who knows? I heard you go on ships to the Antarctica. So Yeah, interesting. But the first question is, what does that moment look like when you find a story that makes you feel, I need to make a film about this?
How does it look like?
Like, what does what's that moment like? And I guess you mentioned earlier, you sometimes come in when a project is already underway. So maybe, yeah, I don't know if there has been another moment, or you can maybe pull it
Well,
from other people when you see something, you like that
mhm.
needs to be a film that needs to be shown to an
Yeah.
audience, wider audience. But,
Yeah. Well, of course, that moment can come in very many ways, right? It could be that you just happen to meet Charlie and Lois and you go like, oh, that's an incredible story. Let's just make it. And you know that it's a good story. Or perhaps maybe the directors one day started in another point and they were like, I'm so frustrated that people don't know how important insects are and how important science is. And they go and try to find some characters that help us illustrate that point. So you can arrive to that knowledge that, oh, there's a story here through different venues, through different, for me, when I'm working in short stories about science, normally, and also it's so against the clock all the time, that for me, since I'm not a scientist myself, I just want to understand what the scientists are trying to answer, the questions that they are trying to answer. And because I'm not a scientist, normally a good indicator is when I hear something and I go like, oh, that's very interesting. That's unexpected. Does that really happen like that? And then if you add the fact that we are on a ship in the middle of the ocean and people already associate that with adventure, that helps. And so, yeah, it's the moment where you go like, ah, that's the moment where you know you have a story.
When was the last time you had a moment like that? Can you remember?
I think that science is awesome. And so every time I'm in an expedition, I have several of those moments. But one that for some reason springs to mind right now is we were somewhere in the Pacific and the scientists discovered this hydrothermal vent field in the deep ocean. They were sending an unmanned submarine to be able to look at the amazing volcanoes and like the vent things in the seafloor. And it's just an out of this world kind of landscape, seascape in this case. And there were these things that looked like big fields of red flowers, beautiful red flowers. But we're talking about 4,500 meters down the surface, below the surface of the ocean. So obviously these are not plants. There's no light there, so there's no photosynthesis. These are animals. Anything that is down there is an animal. And so, but I kind of forget because they look so much like plants. And then they took some samples and I was next to the scientist and then he cuts a little bit takes a bit of the specimen. First, I'm surprised because he feels very bad, the scientist. He, to this day, and he was quite an experienced scientist, feels bad every time that he needs to cut a little bit of an animal. And I thought that was lovely and so human on his part. But the other thing is that then this red liquid pours out of the thing, but this is like cutting a flower. Don't think of an animal. It's like looking at a flower. And I go like, oh, what's that? That looks just like blood. And he's like, oh, it is blood. And I'm like, what? And turns out that this is a worm that lives in the depth of the ocean that takes its energy and its food from the chemicals that these underwater volcanoes are putting out there. So it doesn't eat anything that we eat. It doesn't live in any kind of environment that remotely resembles where we live, but its blood is just like human blood. It just, for me, that blew my mind.
Yeah. Wow. That is a very moment. Thank you for that anecdote. But do you know what it's called? Do you remember? I guess
worms. They are called tube, like a tube worm. Okay. Yeah, look for them. They are beautiful, but they are worms. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. This is another question that came in. It says, when and how did you personally realize the integral nature of storytelling in the lives of humans? What happened in your own life for you to come to this realization? Which you kind of touched on in the beginning, but maybe there's a bit more to it.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that I have the strange, I don't know if it's a privilege or the strange knowledge of exactly the moment I knew I wanted to do this for a living. And I was like about 6 or 7 years old, and I was visiting my best friend in her house. And as we were walking through the living room, her sister, that was much older than us, and she was already in university, she was studying communication. And she was showing her family a short film that she had just shot, and it was a Costa Rican short story that she had turned into a short film. And she was the actress, and she was also directing it. And I thought, I saw her on the TV, and I was like, and she was like, yeah, I shot this. And for the first time, I thought, oh, we can do that as well. It isn't only people in the US who get to do movies. Like, we could do it as well. I could see myself on a screen, or somebody that looks like me. And I just fell in love with it. I always loved stories. When I was little, I would write stories, and my teacher would read my short stories to my classmates. But that was a moment where I knew I wanted to do it in moving images.
Great. And I mean, that's such a strong example of how important it is to see examples and idols we can aspire to, especially
Yeah, absolutely.
we can relate to who look like us. And
yeah,
amazing. That's and it is, I don't know if it's a privilege, but it is amazing that you had that this early on. I think many people wish for that. So that's lots of incredible circumstances and your personality and everything coming together to make that happen. Really cool. Amazing. You've given us a lot of tips, and there's one question that came in and the person who wrote it will probably be grateful for the tips you've already given. But it says, any advice for a storyteller who gets too lost in the story and needs a map out?
Yes.
My
advice is read. There are very good books out there, and educate yourself and take distance from the art of telling stories, in the sense that, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, we are telling stories all the time. That's what we do as human beings. Every time we open our mouth, we're telling a story. So because we do it so naturally, it becomes so difficult to distance ourselves and see a story like Neo sees the Matrix on the movie, to really see the Matrix and how the story is formed and comes together. So the only way to establish that distance and have that cold mind and cold heart when designing a story is by having the discipline to go through the steps. What do I mean? First, write it down in a short sentence and paste that sentence on your wall. And if whatever you're putting in there does not directly relate to that short sentence that you use to describe your story, chances are it doesn't belong there. You might love it, you might think it's wonderful, blah, 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 but it won't be relevant to your story. And then make sure that you know your steps, right? We're going to begin here, because then this thing is going to happen, which is going to surprise the audience. And it's also going to give us fundamental information that we need to understand our character and the action. And then this other thing is going to happen. And what I mean by that is really dissect it. Don't think of a story as if you were an audience. You're not the audience. You're not the witness of your story. You are the God of your story. So you have to dissect it with no heart. You're the Old Testament God, not the New Testament. And so you are ruthless. You're killing anything that doesn't apply to that short phrase that you wrote at the beginning, what your story is about.
Okay. And I imagine it would be helpful to have others in that process at times. I mean, if you're as experienced as you, I don't know how do you work? So for example, if you are out there, you're crafting your story, you have the process down, you've got the steps, you're analyzing with that hard view, but you still pass it on to, say, your husband or someone else around you to have a look at. How does it work without necessarily feeling like you're the audience having to look at it, but bringing in other people's view or opinions on what you've created, what you're creating in the process?
I wish I had a team with me most of the time. As I said at the beginning, sadly, my reality of work, because of budget constraints, because ships are not, they are not eternal. They have a very limited amount of people that they can have inside. I have to work by myself, and I feel that really affects the quality of products, honestly, because you are not using other brains to help you polish the story. Having said that, I think you have to be very critical who you show it to, because you could show it to your husband, but your husband loves you so much that perhaps he is going to be too sweet when talking about the story. He already wants to like it, or he already knows so much about it because you don't shut up about your story that he's going to fill in the blanks of what you're not conveying, really. So I think that something that is really useful is to only show it to people that that really know the craft. And on the other hand, if you know that you have a type of audience that you want to talk to, then perhaps show it to them to see how they react. But something that I think that does work many times as a source of information and feedback is perhaps not necessarily showing your story as is, but saying, oh, I'm thinking of doing a film about these worms that live in the depths of the ocean, and they live off chemicals, and they could show to us how life is possible on other planets that don't have solar energy, and they have human blood. And then you just shut up and see what questions are asked, and that's your story.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm curious about it because I feel like every year, no matter what I do, it's a lesson is that collaboration is
wonderful. Yes, wonderful. I know.
It's key to so many beautiful projects coming to life, including this one. And yeah, maybe I'll just keep weaving that thought to the end of this session. And thank you for collaborating with us, and also being
my pleasure.
Jury, watching all those films every week, contributing your honest opinions and your very informed opinions. And I'm so glad. Yeah, we had you here today as well. I'm going to rewatch today's session for sure. So thank you.
My pleasure.
And finally, also, because we've come to the end of the day, the cherry on top of everything. A big thank you to everyone watching, to everyone who's participated in the sessions today, and the whole team at ALT EFF, who are all, well, not all of them, a few of them are in different places, but quite a few are also together in Panchkani around a big table and are hopefully having a great evening. We're still we're both in Europe, so still semi-daylight here. But wherever in the world you are, have a wonderful day, night time, stay healthy, and thank you so much for watching, and enjoy all the films this week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.